Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Voices and Visions, another episode of the podcast. I'm John Stewart, partner here at Armanino, a national leader of our family office industry. And I have an esteemed colleague with me here today, Mr. Peter Braxton. We've become fast friends over the past, I'd say, half year or so now.
Right.
Peter, why don't you tell the people out there your background, who you are?
Sure, happy to do that. My name is Peter Braxton. I think irrelevant to this conversation, I was a pilot in the Air Force. I was the first military jet over New York City on 9/11, 2001.
I think it's totally relevant. I love that story.
Well, it was also my first day for the Air Force after training, which I guess made it a little bit more complex and interesting, and certainly memorable for me.
I would say nerve-wracking is maybe the word I use, but you're being nice about it.
I would love to say it was nerve-wracking. I was so junior and perhaps naive that I didn't fully appreciate. How about that? The
I can
gravity.
see that because you're in the middle of the moment. You were training for you don't have time to think about what's actually happening, but just respond.
And it was, pre-Facebook, pre-YouTube. This is 2001. I remember I had an LG flip phone, and today I have an iPhone 16 Max Pro Plus or whatever it's called. So the technology has advanced. But in any event, I deployed 8 times to the Middle East, 4 to Iraq, 4 to Afghanistan, flew myself home, took the GMAT, ended up in business school at WashU in St. Louis. Really had a fabulous experience there. I transitioned and moved on to be a banker at Credit Suisse. That was back in, I guess, 2008 to 2012. I was at that bank. And look, it's, the military flying combat missions is a tough, high stress job. So was being at that organization. I used to pull all the second year business school students that wanted a job. They'd walk over broken glass to try to intern or become an associate there. And I'd pull them into a dark closet. I'd put them in a headlock and I'd tell them to go start a company. Win, lose, or draw. I'd rather see them as a client than a colleague, and certainly wanted to have them a breadth of experience. And if I did have one complaint, if I would, about business school, some people I think look at it as a very expensive job placement program.
In some regards, I guess that's true, but there's a lot more to it than that.
There, of course, but I looked at it. I wanted to go to business school, create jobs, not to get a job. I wanted to figure out how the language, the vocabulary, the strategies to create jobs. I believe personally, the greatest thing you can do, I guess, philanthropic, is to give people meaningful work.
Yep.
And certainly the military is meaningful work, and bless the troops and the folks that are putting themselves in harm's way. I'm far removed from that today, but I left. I wanted to start some companies. I wanted to flex that entrepreneurial muscle.
Okay.
I started businesses doing dynamic pricing, airline, hotel, rental car algorithm software,
which is what we all know to be normal now, but that's great. Yeah. What made you jump into that? Like, what was the aha moment there?
If we have time on the podcast, I'm certainly to try to give you the abbreviated version, but I would state, I think any entrepreneur either finds one or two things that really drive them emotionally, and you have to make it's an emotional decision because it can't be financial. So the risk, one is something in life that you see is incorrect and you think you can fix it.
Yep. And
if you find that passion, then you won't give up, because I think, building a business is as tough as it gets. And
it's not easy. There's no straight line there.
It's all the reason. I mean, I used to tell people this country has an incredible tradition of protecting its youth against exposure to, alcohol and, things that they shouldn't be handling until they're mature enough to do so. But as a young company in this country, there are no protections.
No, you're just flapping the breeze.
Afforded to you.
Yeah, you got to figure it out quickly.
Yeah, it's a knife fight.
Yeah.
And so, the second thing is, if there's one thing that you find that, you want to change, the other thing is something that you really hate, because that will also drive you to not give up. You just want to change it.
So you're a self-made man. You're an entrepreneur. As we're talking, you've built a couple companies. You're out there. So let's go into life lessons. I love hearing, like, I feel like you just have so many cool experiences. Every time I've spoken to you, I learn something new and I love it. So, what are some of those most important lessons that you've learned as you've gone through this kind of, I mean, I feel like you've had multiple careers and successfully too. What are some of those important life lessons you've learned?
I think some of the aphorisms or the things that they say about life are true. For me, it's not necessarily about the wins. It's how you pick yourself up from the losses. It's how
Ah,
you
yeah.
rebound and recover versus the success. The success doesn't necessarily teach you all these skills of grit and
Yeah,
perseverance.
winning can hide a lot of things, right? And
And so ultimately, while I respect the value creation and the win, and one of the reasons I really love the family office space is because of the stories behind them. I really respect, and a part of all of those stories is friction, and it's the people in the on the battlefield that are, really kind of running with the guns, not the spectators.
yeah, the man in the arena, so to speak,
That's
right?
right. That's right. The famous
Yeah.
quote, the
Yeah.
Roosevelt quote.
Yep.
So, ultimately, I cut my teeth on the power of private capital, raising capital for the businesses. I had success. I had an exit and found my way to a family office. I think one of the chief questions people ask is, how do you, go work for a family office? And the answer is you don't apply.
Right. They find you.
They find you.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the family that found me out of Chicago was really looking for someone who probably had that kind of military background, chief of staff, high press, high stress situation. They really admired, my entrepreneurial background. They had portfolio companies. It really kind of takes an entrepreneur to really speak to another one, quite frankly.
Yeah. You've lived it. You can speak to the wounds, the hardships. Like it's just not a straight line through that path. It's hard.
It's a squiggly line, and
Yep.
I think people tend to respect your experience. If you take your walls down and talk about how tough it was, they'll do the same, and that's where there's some of those really true, meaningful connections happen. And the third thing they admired, it wasn't necessarily super necessary, but they really admired was my capital markets background. I spoke the language, having been a banker. Credit Suisse, which regrettably is no longer exists,
Well,
not with
yeah,
us
sadly,
anymore.
that's the case for some
Um,
of those. Yeah.
but ultimately, I learned a ton. These families are, frugal. They are fee sensitive. One of the things I don't think a lot of people realize is they are, typically understaffed and under-resourced in
Yeah.
terms of processing
Right.
information.
Right.
And there's so much information that's coming at them at such a clip and pace that it's very difficult to process everything properly. And so, my recommendation to family offices, if they're listening, is to kind of go back to your entrepreneur, pick an area where you're passionate, where you can focus, where perhaps you've had a history of success, and then probably outsource the rest of it. Pay these people what they're worth, and it will end up being cheaper, quite
That's
frankly.
good. What trends are you currently seeing in the family office space? You mentioned one, right? The overwhelming data, ingest, right? And how do you filter that appropriately? What else are you seeing and how are they impacting family office operations?
It's a carriage industry. However, the clients have good credit, so they can kind of pay, they can pay you,
That's true. Yeah.
right? I mean, there's a ton of people in life that spend some of their time trying to, get paid. Lawyers, doctors, perhaps. We've certainly heard a lot about medical debt, but ultimately, if you provide a valuable service, you probably don't have to go hunt down, your payment. Here are some trends, I guess, just to think about it. The technology, I think, is exploding in
Yes.
terms of,
And I got plenty of questions there for you. So yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, go for it.
sure,
List them all out. Go.
sure. It's exploding in terms of offering insights and information to help organize some of this data inflow. But it remains, in my opinion, a kind of belt to belt, belly to belly business. People tend to do business with people they like. They do business with people they trust. People with this extraordinary amount of wealth really do have that luxury. They can pick who they want to work with. they also pick who they don't want to work with, right? Like I don't
That
want
is
to
a
work
really
with,
good way of saying, yeah, I think that's sometimes more what they start with. I don't want to work with those people, so let me go find other people.
yeah. And so ultimately, if they're going to experience some type of liquidation or exit event, ultimately, for the most part, they're probably trying to get out of the HR business, not back into it.
Right, right.
As an insight. And so, as I mentioned earlier, these family offices are understaffed because they really want a kind of a special force around them that will, commit themselves to preserving, privacy and control.
One of the
Around,
things where tech comes into play here is because you don't want to keep adding more human capital. Let some digital capital do the work here,
well,
right?
efficiency. So
Yeah.
every entrepreneur I've ever met, creates a product, they create a byproduct, and they try to monetize both.
Yep.
And in the situation, what happens in this transition from, value creation to perhaps if I could define a family office very, very loosely, it's the management of risk and the management of information. The market will return what the market returns.
Right.
Now, as a trend, as a matter of trend, which you asked about earlier, I do see some family offices gravitate more towards being more, I guess, actively involved. And what does that mean? So I guess traditionally, you might make an investment as a passive LP, as a capital call, you send the money in, you let the general partners do the work, the heavy
Right.
lifting. Their job, of course, is to return capital at some point. The faster, the better.
Yeah, sooner rather than later, right?
Faster, the better.
Yeah.
And ultimately, these very talented grit heavy, persevering entrepreneurs they're not necessarily that patient, but they also want to be more active, right? Like I've never seen any of these people just kind of want to sail off in the sunset. You may think that's the case because they kind of disappear into obscure, maybe less fame, but they still have a lot to contribute. There's only so much bad golf you can play, right? There's only so,
Fair.
right? So ultimately, they want to become more active. They want to use their talents. They want to transition to a different generation, which again is another trend we can talk about. Is this
I know that's my second topic I got for you. Yeah.
kind of wealth
We're
changing?
in sync right here, Peter. I
Hey,
love
we are.
it.
Well, perhaps again, it's my perspective. Just my observations over time,
Right.
having been in this business for over 15 years. So, so technology is coming into play, and it really is an arms race. And the issue I think that the industry has is a bit of fatigue around all of the options that are available to these families. Yeah. So technology arms race, there's
Right.
all types of solutions out there. There's a lot of fatigue around being offered so many different types of solutions. And quite frankly, it's actually critically important to these families to have information that's available, that's kind of true,
Right.
because old information, stale information is no longer true, right? So
Do
what
you
is
think
true
that's the biggest barrier to more family offices like fully embracing digital transformation to use? I'm using a buzzword here, but really, is that do you think that's the biggest barrier there? Or what do you see as those hurdles that they have to go through? Because there are a lot of solutions out there. I agree. Like finding someone, like that's where I say, hey, come to aggregators like you or me and others that know this space and say, hey, what are you really trying to do? Let me walk you through what you can pick from because why waste? You're going to waste months trying to figure this out.
Well, it's not just that. It's all the enormous amount of decision making that they now have to have
Right.
around things that are unrelated to digital transformation, right? And these are, we talked about very briefly, transition issues, legal, trust, estate, cheat, asset liability action.
And
Uh,
keep in mind, these high net worth individuals, they're not experts in that. That's not where they probably made their money, right? Most
exactly.
made their money like they had a
Exactly.
mom and pop manufacturing shop or
My whole
whatever it
point,
is. Yeah,
my
they
whole
don't know what
point,
trust liability. They have no idea what that is.
the whole point is this is a very different business. And ultimately, you think you have a lot more freedom to, now do all the things that you always wanted to do.
Mhm.
But you have to learn a brand new vocabulary. And ultimately, I've seen it. You've probably seen it. You look in the whites of their eyes and they're just kind of big-eyed. They're kind of listening. they're not necessarily understanding every single
And
word.
they're not used to being in a position of weakness because they're coming from a place where they were the expert or they were really good at what they did. And now you're throwing them into a, like you said, a different business. And they're like, I don't know what to do with this.
It's a different business.
Yeah.
And ultimately, this is the kind of, I guess, the sad part about the business. You could be a very, very wealthy man or woman, but you're not an institution. And all of a sudden, you're going to start to compete against these institutional investors
Right.
who, have staff of 40, 80,
Yeah. And they're highly sophisticated, out in front on
300.
data and analytics. Right.
Everybody has a CFA, an MBA,
Right.
a CPA,
Yeah. All of them.
JD,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
And they're able, well, more importantly, they're able to process this stuff much more quickly. And so, my other piece of advice to any of the family offices are listening is to be, almost incredibly honest with yourself as to what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, and just be very responsive. I think that the pace at which these firms, these organizations, these entrepreneurs, other entrepreneurs that are
Yeah.
raising capital need an answer. I always tell people, yes is better than a no is better than a maybe. And so give a quick no. It's actually a better answer than, oh, maybe let me, let's just
Well, and
wait
save
for
your
it.
own time too, right? Like if you don't know and it's not something core to what your vision is, then just say no to it.
Just
Like,
say no. No one's going to be offended by that,
yeah.
quite frankly. They're going to be like, thank you. So, I can kind of move on and not spend any more time on a
Do you
situation.
find that that's the position you're often in when you're advising your families? Like, is it often having, hey, let's just stay clear to our vision here, or what kind of stuff comes up when you're asked to advise?
Focus, focus, focus.
Yeah, they can't do everything, but they can do a lot of things. But it's going to take that focus.
Well, when you focus and you practice, I've never met anybody that got good at something without practicing.
Right. Right.
And
The 10,000 hour rule. I mean, whether you believe that or not, but yeah, exactly. You're not, no one's, I tell my kids this, no one's instantly good at things. It doesn't work that way.
we both have kids,
Right.
we're both dads. And so, it's kind of life lessons that you want to pass on and provide guidance for your children. Well, one of the reasons I really love this world of family office is because it actually does, believe it or not, bring me back to my military days where I was kind of fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves.
Oh, I
Uh,
like that. Yeah. Okay.
Ultimately, there's so much information and opportunities that are coming at you that you kind of need a special force to come in there and kind of chop it all up, gatekeep.
I
You
really like how you summarize it. That kind of gets to the point of why do you like every now and again I'll get asked why even have a family office? And I think you're summarizing it really well. It's a special force to help you make quick decisions on what you want to achieve.
Correct. And leave a legacy, help, transcend and help the next entrepreneur avoid some of the mistakes and pitfalls that you've had to encounter. Keep your mind fresh, learn about new technology that maybe would have made your life easier
Right.
back in the day that are now available to you. But but there's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly around all of this stuff. And one of the ugly things is no matter how big you are, you're not an institution.
Right.
You're not
And you shouldn't try to be one. I mean, that's not what you're advocating either, right? Like that is okay that you're going to have those institutional investors, but that doesn't mean you have to be that person. You can craft a vision of a family office here that is highly capable in what you want it to be.
and pick what you want it to be. I
Right.
mean, that's the struggle, which is, man, you could invest in everything from auto dealerships to, fintech to try to solve for the next, diabetes.
Yeah, it could be anything. So what are you into? What are you passionate about?
Make it personal too. I mean,
Right.
ultimately, one of the, these one of the issues that I encounter when I'm mentoring others that are trying to, come up behind me is to be very, very patient and of course listen more than you speak. If you listen more than then eventually they'll tell you what they're interested in, what they're
Right.
passionate about. It could be sailing, it could be, it could be building a golf course. I've seen that too. And then take note, whether mental or physical, and then don't stray outside of that when you're talking to them
Right.
because they're not going to have an interest.
Keep the main thing the main thing. I think that's a saying nowadays from the kids. So let's go with that one. But that's what you're saying. Like,
That's exactly what I'm saying. And be very thoughtful around that because then if you start to present information that is irrelevant or out of scope, at 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 best they're going to say no, thank you, and at worst they're going to get angry
Right.
and understand that you do not listen. And so I think one of the biggest skills in this is I hate to say it, trying to be a psychologist or a therapist.
No, it's funny. So I usually say, I'm a consultant. That's what I do here at Armanino, right? I may lead our family office industry, but my background's in strategy and operations consulting. And I always kind of joke like 50% of my job is being a therapist. Like we're here to
Hmm.
listen. And what I'll tell a new consultant coming up, which is no different than what you're saying, is ask questions. Don't give statements. Ask questions. Learn. Listen to them.
And be authentic and genuine.
Yeah. Have really probing, genuinely sincere questions. And
Sincere.
they'll open up and they'll want to engage with you.
I don't know anyone that wouldn't.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to tell you if you ask the right question. So, and in that manner, it's a kind of a lot like dating, right? You just want to be thoughtful.
Right. Well, it's almost
Truly,
what you're describing. You're describing the process of building trust too, right? Like you said, it's a carriage business. People know each other. They're not necessarily competitive with each other, so to speak, but it is about who you want to work with and the trust you have in them.
it's a referral business.
Right.
If you do a great job, then they will introduce you and position you in such a way and manner that you will move on to the next opportunity. And quite frankly, kind of start on second base versus having to, get out of the batter's box.
Yeah, no, that's the hard part, right? So,
Right.
well, let's go down the tech segment for a minute. So,
Sure.
you like me, like we see a lot of tech, it's all out there. What are some of those technologies or tools that you have found to be most effective in, let's say, streamlining operations, right? And you don't have to name the specific ones unless you want to, but I just mean general, really. Like, what are you seeing that, hey, again, giving advice to a family office out there that maybe they're just emerging or they're just starting? What are some of those technologies or tools you're like, hey, you want to really look at these ones because they're really going to help you stay efficient?
I think you're really going to want, this is the one area I think where that does translate from kind of the widget factory into the family office space, which
Sure.
is managing a balance sheet, assets, liabilities, cash
Yeah.
flows.
Right.
Okay. Um, the only way people get poorer on this planet is when they have a senior obligation and they have to liquidate an asset at a suboptimal time. That's the
Right.
only way it happens. Okay, suboptimal time means I've got to sell something, probably take a haircut, and then also pay tax on it,
Right. High interest rates, whatever it might be.
transaction cost,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you have let's call it 20% haircut, and then you're redeploying this capital to solve for something else,
Right.
that you would want 20% more on. It's hard. It's very, very, very difficult. And so managing these cash flows. So any type of software that gives you this information as to where things are, which then allows you to start to plan for things in the future according to time constraints. Time,
Right.
uh,
Because that's the one thing that they can't buy more of.
it is, you cannot replicate it.
Right. That's the one thing nobody's going to be able to touch as time. So
It's the
the
most valuable thing. You
expediency
make
and
more money,
efficiency matters. Right.
you make more money. I hate to say it to the folks who are in a tough situation in LA, right? You can buy another house. You cannot make more time.
Right.
And if I were to really, find out what the underlying issue is, where, it's all the time you spent building that house into a home that you can't get back, and it really kind of shocks a lot of people, regardless of your status. It's a bummer. So the technology that can help you with reporting all of these different types of assets now that you're entering into that may or may not be liquid, that may or may not be kind of formally marked to market, which will kind of give you a better picture of your capability to invest and deploy capital when things are going to be harvested. I don't want to use all these crazy terms, but when you expect to see a return on that, and then what you can do with those proceeds, and still maintain, this life of balance or expectation. In every single person I've ever met, they always have a different active versus passive investment style. They have a different risk tolerance.
Yeah. Say risk level to me is one of that's where you almost where you start in some
Okay.
capacities, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they have a different liquidity requirement.
Every situation is different, right?
every single, every brother and sister,
Yeah,
we
they're
watch
different.
some of the family dynamics now.
Right.
is very, very different. You could have, again, a sister who's married to an attorney in Manhattan Beach with 5 kids, who has a brother in a family, family office dynamic, who's single, lives
Right.
in
On a
Dallas.
ranch in Montana or something, right? Like there's
Right.
two very different lifestyles that
Two
are,
different lifestyle, different liquidity
right.
requirement, different risk tolerance, different active versus passive investment style, and create a tremendous amount of conflict in terms of agreeing on what to do with these proceeds, so to
Well,
speak.
let's shift in that for a second because I want to talk about because that goes back to that generational thing. What are those best practices that you recommend for managing intergenerational communication and decision making? Because I think we're gonna, as you and I know, as the boomers continue to retire, this is going to keep this is we're the beginning of this. So for the next 10, 15 years, we're going to see even more of that transition. What are some of those best practices you're already seeing now? What advice you got there?
I only have one answer to that, and I don't know if everyone's really going to like it, but it's tremendously strong leadership per generation. I
Yeah.
think somebody has to step up in kind of a servant leadership attitude, listen to everybody,
For the
what
better
they
good of the
want,
family overall.
what their needs are, and kind of subordinate their own requirements or their own needs to theirs, and then work towards that, and everyone will defer to you. If I've seen other situations where these things fall apart.
Yeah. And you see the statistics in the report that most of these families can't make it past Gen 3, right? And so,
Well, there's a whole
and
industry, of attorneys that will help you sue your brother, your sister, your mom or dad.
that certainly sounds so fun to do. Yeah. Mm.
Well,
I mean, you and I both
yeah,
sat in a room and seen
sarcastically, it's
that.
the,
I've
it's the
seen it
worst thing that can
too.
happen
Right.
to you
We've been in
because,
those situations where we've seen the families doing that, and it's a shame, and you hate seeing it. I don't, you want to somehow find a way to help them solve that so they don't go down that road.
well, that's why I'm in this business, is to try to prevent it. I think every family's got a different dynamic to it. There is no such thing as this perfect idyllic, family situation. It does not exist. I
Right.
promise you, I've seen them all. Seen them all. It doesn't exist. And so to try to prevent that controversy, somebody's got to step up with this type of servant leadership and subordination, and spend their life trying to help their siblings, excuse me, or their mom and dad, or their son and
Their
daughter,
family members, whoever it
family
is.
members achieve what they want to achieve. And that's what they kind of drive to. So by de facto, that's kind of, again, harkening back to this kind of fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. That's kind of where I kind of position myself, is to really understand what that is, what's that goal, what's that outcome you're looking for, and then people will try to pay you to achieve that result, right? Obviously, that, again, we've discussed this. There's no straight line; it's always squiggly. And so my preference is always to work with someone who's done it before,
Right,
been
right. Because the
through.
brand new ones are where they're just going to hit wall after wall after wall because they have
Well,
no idea unless they get a good advisor like you or someone like you to say, hey, hold on, we can help facilitate this road a little easier for you. It won't be bump free, but we can help you avoid some of the bigger ones.
it's quite frankly the excitement of the transition, right? That honeymoon phase of now having this capability that really excites people, that you very quickly learn you do not have the time to listen to everybody, every opportunity, every piece of technology, and so pick what you love. If it's conservation, sustainability, be known for that. You will learn everything there is to know about that because everyone will volunteer the information to you.
Right.
You kind of have that luxury. And then, of course, you need to outsource that to the people you like and trust. The rest of it usually takes care of itself. But if one of those two things is missing, you don't like them, but you trust them, or perhaps you don't trust them, but you like them. We have friends from college like that,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
right? Right. And
Yeah.
yeah, you got to stay away from those situations. Because you can get through friction points, and when things move sideways with people you like and trust, I have a quote. It's actually worth reading on this podcast, if I might.
Go for it. Let's do it.
The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Dr. Martin Luther King, and I've had that on my phone
Hey,
since
that's appropriate. That's coming up here in a week, so this is good timing for that too.
Perhaps it is. But I've had that on the cover of my iPhone since I've had an iPhone. iPhone 1 came out in 2007. I was an early adopter. technology. I've never changed it. I've gotten married. I've got kids. They're on the other. Those photos are well stocked and kept. But I look to that kind of quote, not just in times of combat and in my military days, but in times of challenging controversy. There's always going to be a situation where things just do not follow that straight line to an outcome that you
Well, I
planned.
think that's when character shows, right? Like when you're in that, I mean, when you're in that moment, whether it's you're in a corporation or you're running a family office or whatever it may be, right? That's to me how you define character. Like, how do you handle that chaos? Because it's not easy and you can be overwhelmed and respond poorly easily. So how do you control yourself? How do you have that kind of discipline for yourself?
That's right. Well, related to that is another quote that I think I made this one up. This is mine.
All right, let's go with it. This is the Peter
Going back
Braxton
to
quote. Let's do it.
unmet expectations, communicated or not, is the root of all conflict.
Oh, see, I love that. Yeah, you're speaking to something there. Yeah.
Unmet expectations, communicated or not, is the root of all conflict. And if you really think about it, it could
It
be as
kind of
simple
speaks
as
true to a lot of
waiting
things
on
real quickly.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
the waiter bringing you a glass of ice or a glass of water without ice. Small conflicts, obviously, but conflict.
Right.
And then there's large conflicts when expectations are not met in this kind of area of finance. So those expectations have to be clearly communicated, and when they are not going to be met, as early as possible, communicated that we have an obstacle and a friction point to navigate together. And if you like the person, you trust the person, you can probably get through it. If
Right.
you don't, you won't, which also leads to a tremendous amount of turnover in this space.
Say people vote with their feet. If there's unmet expectations, mostly uncommunicated, they're going to vote with their feet.
That's right. So again, I've seen a lot of different situations. I'm not the soothsayer. I don't know, what to say in all of them, but through observation, I've seen a lot of situations play
I
through.
may put this quote on my iPhone, so we'll see.
I use it in my marriage. Unmet expectations, communicated or not, is
Yeah,
the
it's a really good way. I mean, it applies kind of all over the board.
universally.
Yeah, it really does.
Teachers, teachers.
Listen, let's use crystal ball for that. I mean, listen, you're a leader and an influencer in the space. Let's use crystal ball. What do you think the family office of the future is going to look like, right? Like, so let's go 10 years out. We've already talked about some of the trends that are going to impact that. What do you think this looks like in 10 years?
Well, I do think there is a trend to this wealth transition point that we alluded
I
to, where
agree. I think it's a major impact right now. We
the
haven't
new
seen this much
generation is
wealth
going to kind of
transition before.
step up. And I
Yeah.
think there's going to be, and I'm optimistic here. I think some could be pessimistic. They see a lot of climate change and obstacles that we as an organ, like a country, and maybe even world face.
Yeah, there's a lot of headwinds out there to talk about. I agree. Yeah.
But I'm optimistic when kind of forced against between a rock and a hard place. The human kind of mankind has this incredible ability to kind of acclimate or kind of redirect energy.
Yep.
And so I think the trends are, do well, do good. There's going to be better food options, available to us. We're going to kind of change the trend of this kind of very quick kind of, we have no time to cook dinner to, hey, this is, a home cooked meal is a luxury, and we're going to slow things down a little bit and we're going to do things a little bit better in just about every area of
I
education.
like this vision you're painting. Keep going, Mr. Braxton. I like this.
Well, you got to be optimistic, but I am.
Yeah.
When,
Well,
when,
necessity is also the mother of invention, to throw another quote out, right? So that's what you're talking about. Like
that's how we started this conversation.
that's how we started it, right?
How we started the conversation. So I think in governance, I think in food, I think in travel and relaxation, how we prioritize work as a generation, I think things are going to get better, ultimately better. And I'm tremendously optimistic.
I'd share the same positive view. I think in during times of hardship or massive change, let's say, I think you're right. The human spirit trying to find a way through. It's just inherent in our DNA. It's just how we are programmed, to be honest. And that's when really cool things get developed. And it's
It's
stuff
a
you and I
very
can't even
exciting,
see yet, but it's coming.
it's a very exciting time to be alive.
I agree. Like some people get pissed
Pace,
about. I share the same view. I think really cool things are about to happen, and we don't even know really what those are yet.
the pace of change, the technology in all aspects and all facets of our lives, the control that we have, the customization and bespoke lives that we can create. never before have been seen.
That's what excites me most about this space is when you talk to family offices or high net worth individuals, the majority of those conversations aren't about, oh, I have all this cool money and I can go do cool things with, which is what people think they talk about, which they don't, right? You and I know that's not really how they talk. What they talk about is the impact they want to have. And I think that's what excites me is this generational handoff where you went from one high net worth to, let's say they had four kids, four high net worth kids, right? There's an exponential thing here. All those individuals are going to have a different flavor on how they want to make an impact. And I think
They
that's
have to
going to
define,
drive
they
this
have to
innovation.
define that though.
Yeah, they have to
They,
define it.
they
That's the
really have
hard.
to commit to it,
Yeah,
and stick to it because again, entrepreneurial, there's going to be these friction points that are going to try to knock you off of that path.
right.
And those who stick to it will be again, the knowledge leaders of the future. So if it's cleaner energy, whatever it may be, I don't know.
Whatever you're into, right? It could be, who knows what it is.
I'm agnostic. I really am.
Right.
But it's all very, very interesting to me. I like to constantly learn. One of the things that I noticed, about that human condition is when you stop learning, that's when you start dying. So, keep on learning, be curious. It will give you more energy and optimism, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Quick segue here because I love that question. So my kids, like we've talked, we have young kids, and I had my 8-year-old ask me one day, Dad, what are you going to do to retire? Which for me is not anytime soon, right? I'm not retiring anytime soon. But I was like, okay, that's interesting. I was like, well, one, it's not anytime soon. But two, what I said to him, I said, I don't know, but I know it's going to be stuff I just keep learning. I want to keep learning new things. Whatever that means in retirement, that has to be what I do. Just my background's engineering. I'm curious by nature. I want to solve problems. I don't know what it'll be, but I know it's going to be about learning something.
I agree. I mean, I think that same kind of existential question. I'm 47 during COVID, right, where the world was kind of shook for a couple months there, at least, off balance.
Yeah.
And my question was, why don't I just start doing, enjoying the life of, it will feel like I'm retired if I, feel like I'm not working,
Right.
doing what I love to do. This just happens to be it. I love starting new companies. I love ideating. I love advising and
Like you
coaching.
said, the fun time to be in this space. There's a lot of change, and change can be scary to some, but it can be opportunity for others.
Yeah,
And
and in
I
that
lean
way,
on that opportunity side. Yeah.
in that way, I think I'm kind of starting to look at it a lot like perhaps like NFL coaching, right? There's only so many teams out there. There's only so many positions. There's only so many people who are in power. And
Right.
while I might have been a head coach, at this family office, perhaps I can be an offensive coordinator at this team, on this team, and just
Right. It depends on the mix and the make and what they're doing. Right.
focus my talents and my, where my passions lie in this ecosystem, so to speak.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is great. And I know we're getting to the end of time here. I know I want to be respectful of your day here. So let's bring it back to something near term. Give me one big thing you're looking forward to this year. Could be anything.
You should have prepped me for this
I
question.
should have prepped you for this. I mean, it could be me coming to Beaver Creek and hanging out with you. You can say that. I'll take it.
Are you coming? Are you
I'll
coming?
do it, buddy. I'll do it. Let's go.
All right, all right, all right. I think one of your colleagues might be hosting something here in short order. So
I'm pretty sure he is in a couple weeks here. Yeah,
we're
I
gonna,
may
we're
be out
gonna,
there for that. We'll see.
we're gonna have to figure out if it makes sense
Yeah.
to come out here. But look, one of the things that I realized, I guess, perhaps growing up in an environment where I had two parents kind of working full time to provide, claw, raise their boys, which they've been successful neurosurgeon. I'm in the family office space. My other brother's an entrepreneur. It's to spend time with my kids because they are growing up so quickly and so
You
fast.
can't get it back. You can't get it back. You cannot put that back in the bottle.
Yeah, yeah. I just said it was last night. We have this kind of beautiful, kind of marble dining room table, and my kids used to be able to pass freely underneath it without like ducking, and not bumping their head on this thing. And both of them now are heads and shoulder. They're 3 and 5 above this table. And it felt like it was only 8 months ago when at least the youngest one.
Wait till they're 10 and 8 and they're crawling on top of the table and jumping on it because that's going to be real fun.
Here's the good news. I've got it. This is a weird thing about me. When I like something in life, I get multiple. So that could be pants.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I've got another identical. This is a true story. Table. What's going on here? I've got an identical table in storage.
Do you really?
I do. It's identical. It's
This is awesome. Okay.
marble table, and that way, I don't let my possessions possess me, right? I love the table. I think it's beautiful. It really kind of sets the dining area up. But if they, crayon or marker on it, back in the day when I was a kid, and my parents were really kind of working to provide and furnish the home. If we messed any of that stuff, it would have been, holy hell to pay.
Oh, of course it would be. Yeah, you wouldn't want that. You don't want that response.
Now, I don't care. I really don't care. I got it.
Worst case, I bring in the other one.
Well, I really like it, so I bought two. So in any event, I'm really looking forward to, skiing with my son, creating kind of these lifetime experiences, memories, perhaps getting some travel. I think we're going to Scotland to play
that's gonna be fun
this summer. That should be really fun. My wife's 40th birthday, so I'm trying to, I'm trying to outdo myself.
We'll bleep that out so no one knows, but that's cool.
Okay. But yeah, the last I think anniversary. This is a quick one. We have 3 minutes. Actually, it's probably worth saying.
Go for it. Yeah, let's go. Good way to end it. Let's go.
We went to Italy during our honeymoon and did Venice and did Capri and went around the Amalfi Coast and newlyweds. So I was in the Air Force. Everywhere I go, I would usually buy something. Something. It would be a lamp. It could be a rug from the Middle East or something. And so we went to Italy. I bought these beautiful kind of like lemon kind of pasta bowls. And at the time, my wife, my practical and very thoughtful wife was like, well, we've got a long trip ahead. We're going to, we can't buy too many of these things. We're going to break them. So ultimately we only bought 3 and we were unable for years to host anybody, any couple, because we only had three of these beautiful dishes, right? So
this is awesome. Yeah.
So right before we moved out here to the Vale area,
sure,
I had a friend that told me they were going to Venice, and I said, "Hey, can you stop by the shop?
Buy some more bowls.
I need you to pick up these bowls." I sent pictures. I done the markings on the back. I gave the address. I said, "Hey, pay for everything. I'll buy an extra suitcase." And she did, and she brought them back to me. I hand flew them out to Vale. Our anniversary happened to be a couple days after we moved out here, and we both love Italian food. I took her to this restaurant called Ti Amo, and prior to the reservation, I dropped off these bowls.
No way! So they brought them out with food?
Could you serve the entree in these bowls?
That's awesome. You won the anniversary, sir. That's a win.
And they brought them out, and she was immediately, "We have to buy these bowls from you." And the waitress said, "I'm sorry, they're not for sale. They're already yours."
That's perfect. Oh my, you nailed that. How do you top that?
I don't know how to top it, but I'm thinking about it. I got to figure it out.